Hey everybody, it's just Deborah from True to You Celebrancy. I've actually just been doing a live video on my Facebook page, and I'm not technically advanced enough to know how to get it off my Facebook page onto the computer and upload it here onto YouTube. So what I'm wanting to do is just swing by and say hello to everybody. We are in very unusual times, aren't we, globally, with this coronavirus, COVID-19. So from my celebrant perspective, what I was wanting to do, and please do check out my Facebook page for the video, but what I was wanting to do was just say hello, just think about how, as a celebrant, certainly as a celebrant in England, so I'm only coming from a perspective in England at the moment, which is different to Ireland, Scotland, as well as everywhere else in the world. But certainly from my perspective as a celebrant in England, I was just wanting to explain how I am taking a very sensible, pragmatic, considered, balanced, risk-assessed and professional approach to managing my business, caring for the people for whom I'm creating ceremonies and delivering ceremonies, and just share a little bit of what I'm doing with you about that. So, as some of you may know, if you've ever watched one of my other videos, I've been a nurse of 30 years, as well as a celebrant more recently. And this is one of those situations where there's quite a few. There's a lot of situations where my nursing career has influenced, supported, helped, and really enhanced my celebrant career. But I can tell you now that all those lectures and practical lessons about washing hands has really paid off. Although can you see how sore my fingers are? That's from washing my hands diligently for 2 minutes. No, I've not been singing happy birthday twice because I'm well trained in how to wash my hands and I have to do it all the time in my nursing work. So I do have a good measure of how long I need to be washing my hands for. But I will say I am thinking more about it and probably even myself doing it more than I normally would. And we know in England the advice has been that is singularly one of the best things we can do to help stop the spread of this horrible virus. But again, thinking about all of my couples, all of you out there in the wedding industry, in the funeral industry, all of us who come together to create a joined up team around a family, a bereaved family, a young family, a couple wanting to celebrate getting married, then we've all got lots of questions and we'll all be approaching this slightly differently. Our couples do have, and understandably so, questions, worries and concerns. So I just wanted to share how I've been doing my risk assessments. Now, when I was a senior manager nursing, which I still have some managerial duties, but they're not as much now. I'm largely senior clinical level, which is lovely because I'm working with people, which is what I do. But one of the things we used to do was take a matrix to assess any risk. And what that matrix essentially did was balance to a couple of things. It would balance the likelihood of a risk event. So in our case, COVID-19. So it would balance the likelihood or the probability, if you like, of something happening against the impact, the worst case scenario impact, if that event happened. Well, it's happened because it's here, hasn't it? So it's happened. But in England, we can reasonably assume that the advice from the government is going to change. It's certainly going to change over the next 6 to 8 weeks, if not sooner. And our government had an emergency meeting of a COBRA committee, which is an emergency, quickly convened meeting that responds to developing information across all manner of forums. And in this case, COVID-19. And from that meeting, we were given, as a population in England, advice from Chris Vitti, who is the Chief Medical Officer for England, and also, I've forgotten the other gentleman's name again, Sir Patrick Vallance, who is the Chief Scientific Officer for the country. And they stood side by side with our Prime Minister. Now, as I said on my Facebook feed, rightly or wrongly, and we all have our own thoughts on this, and I'm respectful of every other opinion, but rightly or wrongly, that is where I am choosing to receive my input on all of this, to receive my information coming in and to balance my decisions. And the information I am giving very clearly to my couples and to others is choose your source. Choose a reliable source. You may have different sources that you trust to the ones that I have chosen, but try as much as you can to limit your input of information to a few sources. You can Google anything these days and it will drive you, let me tell you, it will drive you absolutely batty, because there are so many different thoughts and opinions. I'm not here to tell you what ones are right, but there are so many thoughts and opinions out there on what the right thing is to do, what we should be doing and when we should be doing it. So choose where you receive your information from, stick to that, because what you want is consistent advice. And if you look all over the place at every different person in every different country and try and follow every different piece of advice, every critique of any press conference that's given, of which there undoubtedly always is, regardless of who gives the press conference, who gives the information, there is somebody there that critiques that. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be confusing. So that is, just so you know, for being explicit and transparent, that's where I'm taking my information from. So I have done what I've called my meta risk assessment. So looking at likelihood and probability over the next 6 weeks, I've thought about right now, here and now, for the foreseeable, am I going to be cancelling, from my perspective as your wedding supplier, as your funeral celebrant, am I going to be cancelling my commitment to you as your celebrant? No. That's the good news. No. I'm taking a balanced, sensible, cautious precautions, including the cracked hands. I'm doing everything I can do, but my commitment as it stands with the current advice is to commit to you and your ceremony just as we've been planning to do. So that's my meta. That's taken in the context of the advice on mass gatherings at the moment and what risks they may or may not pose, and what guidance we're being given on isolating ourselves, others not attending public events, etc. So at the minute, there is no change from True to You Celebrancy on what we should be doing there, or what I shall certainly be doing. The second thing I'm doing is using that same process, likelihood and impact, to balance decisions with you. So for my couples, thinking with you at a very personal level about your ceremony. And what I'm trying to do supportively is work with you and the suppliers around us. So if I take a wedding ceremony, which is just one of the ceremonies as a celebrant I provide, but if I think of wedding ceremonies, what I'm suggesting to all my couples, some of you of whom I have spoken to already, some of whom I'll be emailing and contacting certainly today and tomorrow, I'll be suggesting that we have a WhatsApp group that may involve your wedding venue, it may involve your photographer, your caterers, and I think personally that's one of the fastest, most responsive ways that we can all be joined up in our thinking together, keep the conversation open, keep the lines of dialogue and thinking joined up and together, so that you feel you're at the centre of everything we're doing, which is right. We want to think about things like, is your venue having a deep clean? What contingency has it got if its staff don't come in? What's my contingency if I have to, for goodness sake, self-isolate? I really hope not, but I've got plenty of Baileys in, so I'm happy. I've got my Baileys. I can live on that for 7 days. I'm quite sure I'd live on it for longer, but I'll certainly give it a crack for 7 days. But if I had to self-isolate, I have 3 trusted colleagues very nearby. I will help them out. They will help me out. That's what the celebrant community does. That's what any good community does, isn't it? It helps each other out at times like this. So I would like to reassure you, and I would want to know from your other suppliers that they have something similar in place. I also want to help you identify on your guest list anybody that we know is at a heightened risk from this horrible virus. So we know elderly people. Maybe you have grandparents, people of a different generation on your guest list. You may have somebody who has chronic, severe underlying health conditions that you were hoping would be able to come along. Somebody who, again, their immune system would be weakened by this. And if they should catch COVID-19, then it could be a catastrophic physical event for them. For most of us, the symptoms are going to be very mild. And again, we heard that was reiterated. I'd heard that before. It was reiterated very clearly by Chris Chris, the Chief Medical Officer. So Chris Whitty again reiterated the symptoms are likely to be very, very mild. Interestingly, though, they're most contagious in the early stages when those symptoms are mild. So what we want to do is to send out a message if you would like. This is not something you have to do, but it's something I am very happy to help you word sensitively and considerately. But we want people to think about if they are showing early warning signs, to follow advice and maybe not to come, or to be given permission from you not to come to your ceremony. They may be worried about saying to you, I really think it's best I don't come. They don't want to disappoint you. You know, you mean something to each other, which is why they've been invited to your ceremony. So that's something I can help you think about. And finally, you know, thinking about for those people who might not be able to travel, who've been advised because they're not living in England not to travel to us, or if they do travel to us, maybe they'd be at risk of not being able to get back home. Who knows? But as a civil celebrant, as an independent civil celebrant registered with the Fellowship of Professional Celebrants, I am really happy to be creative in a ceremony, to have people videoing, live streaming to somebody who can't be with us. I will send you a PDF copy of your full ceremony script for you to share in advance of the ceremony or afterwards. The benefit of doing it in advance of the ceremony, I've done this in a funeral ceremony and I spoke about that on the Facebook video live, but I have in advance of a ceremony actually shared a PDF version of a funeral ceremony with the sister of the deceased in Australia, and the niece of the deceased actually read through the ceremony live. It was very, very early in the morning in Australia for the sister of the deceased, but they read through that ceremony live, in live time with us, and we mentioned them in the ceremony. They had the music choices, so they could play the music at the time we would be playing the music. And although far from ideal, it did bring comfort. I heard from the niece afterwards. I had an email from her saying how much they'd really appreciated being able to virtually be alongside us in the ceremony. So I'm very happy to think creatively with you about ways we can involve people who can't come. And finally, worst case scenario, if with this evolving picture we find ourselves in a situation similar to Italy or other places where it feels like there's a much more robust, required, needed, necessary social restriction of social movement and guidance on not having a ceremony, or if your venue or other suppliers have to cancel, or if you choose yourself to cancel because you feel better doing that, then please don't worry. Your deposits will be honoured. We will do our best to rearrange your ceremony with you together. We'll think about that with your suppliers. I will delay any further payments on your ceremony until we've got a date booked. And we will think about what we can do so that you're not losing out, and so that we can recreate together the ceremony that you want, that you deserve, together in a way that feels better for you, that is safer for you, if that's what it comes to. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that sort of process of assessing the likelihood and the impact and coming up with a very considered, professional, helpful response. But you're my priority, and as True to You Celebrancy always says, I'm working with you, for you. So we will keep an eye on this fast-moving, fast-paced, fast-moving, evolving picture. I have a holiday, as any of you whose ceremonies I'm doing know already. I have a 2-week holiday coming up in April, the first 2 weeks in April, so it may or may not go ahead, but what can we do? You know, we'll roll with the punches on that one. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye, and I hope that this has been helpful and in some way reassuring. Look after yourselves. We all have to look after each other. Let's look after our elderly and our vulnerable people. Let's keep washing our hands, however sore it makes our fingers. Look at that out. And let's keep doing what we can do. Let's join together as a community, whether it's as a celebrant community, whether it's you with your family and your neighbours. Let's look out for each other. And at times like this, you know, it's a privilege to be human and to be there and to be able to respond to these things and offer each other comfort and offer each other some form of support and reassurance in worrying times. I'm going to go now. Bye-bye.